the void. But his real name was Knull.
Knull, the god of the symbiotes, and their planet Klyntar explored. We all know how Peter Parker transformed into the Black Spiderman costume, Eddie Brock into Venom, and Cletus Kasady into Carnage. Through symbiotes, of course, the amorphous, inorganic beings that take over hosts, human or alien, and drive them to do crazy things. But are all symbiotes, also called the Klyntar, bad guys? Well, the answer is both yes and no. How did they come into existence? We know that symbiotes have a hive mind, but who's at the nexus? All these questions have one and only answer: Knull, the ancient god who created them. So, Knull wasn't just the god of the symbiotes, but he also ruled the abyss, the vast, empty vacuum that was there when the universe hadn't come into existence, when there was no light, when there was no life. But then came the Celestials, who created light, and with it, the universe, as we know it, came into existence. But Knull didn't like this. He felt that his dominion was being infringed by the Celestials. So, he waged war on them, slaying all life and even Celestials and other beings. To achieve his plan, he created a most powerful Necrosword, or the All-Black, which was a weapon made of his own form and answered only to him. After losing the Necrosword, he went on to create the symbiotes to further his god-slaying plans. But then the symbiotes got infected with the idea of nobility and justice, something that Knull called their poison, their venom. But Knull, being Knull, the god of the endless abyss, didn't get demoralized. He used other means to free himself from Klyntar, which was not only his prison, but his throne world as well. In the latest story arc, Knull came to Earth and wreaked his havoc on the denizens and superhero teams, including the Avengers and the X-Men. In this video, we will discuss all there is about this Avenger-level threat, and also how he could be the new Thanos-like supervillain that Marvel is trying to tease.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
His weapons were not just tools, they were life forms. Intelligent.
Knull, creator of the symbiotes. Origin explored. Knull was as ancient as time itself and existed in the darkness when darkness was all there was. Himself a malevolent god, he was an avatar of Oblivion who was the embodiment of death and predated the multiverse. He ruled a place called the Abyss, which was nothing but eternal and infinite emptiness that existed between the destruction of the 6th iteration of the universe and the creation of the 7th. He was destined to remain in deep slumber for an eternity, but then came the Celestials, gods who created universes. The Celestials started creating life out of nothingness by virtue of the light of the creation. The light not only awoke Knull from his slumber, but enraged him because the Celestials were impeding and infiltrating Knull's eternal void, his kingdom of darkness and emptiness. With the light came shadow, and from his very shadow, Knull created a sword called the Sword of Living Darkness, which he called the All-Black. With All-Black, he decapitated one of the Celestials. We implore you to understand the gravity here. Knull was so powerful that he killed one of the ancient beings who created the universe. After this point, the Celestials punished him and cast him back into the void, but they didn't realize what they had done. They had practically sent him to where he belonged. Darkness was his ally. In the void, Knull used the head of the Celestial he had slain as his home. Here, he created the first symbiotes in the shape of a sword and converted the Celestial's severed head into a forge, which allowed Knull to use the head's divine energy to refine the powers of the blade. Although extremely powerful, these proto-symbiotes were far from perfect and feared intense heat and sound. This fear was something that got passed down through genetic memory. This reveals exactly why symbiotes feared sound, and how Spider-Man had been able to defeat a symbiote using sound. Wielding the All-Black, Knull would go on to kill all beings of light, and the sword would gain several names like the Necrosword or the Godslayer. Furthermore, he had created a suit of armor from the same darkness as his sword. While massacring a group of gods who wore golden armor, a god stabbed Knull in his face, but Knull managed to stab through the last god's heart. The following chaos sent Knull to a desolate planet that was home to Gore, who would later become the God Butcher. Knull had crash-landed on this planet, and after waking up, he realized that his Necrosword was gone. In reality, Gore had taken the sword and unwittingly continued Knull's quest of slaying the beings of light. Knull was stuck on this harsh and desolate planet. With nothing to do and his sword gone, the Lord of the Abyss started to ponder over his next course of action. For about a century, Knull convalesced his new home. He soon realized that if he could form a symbiotic relationship with the denizens of the planet by bestowing his essence on the hosts, he could learn from them and manage to control them remotely through galaxies. He turned the lesser creatures into predatory monsters and drew strength from them. He amassed an army of symbiotes and conquered the planet. Furthermore, he created a fleet of symbiote dragons and helped him conquer innumerable worlds and destroyed the civilizations on these worlds. It was now that he became aware of the might of his powers and started to build a hive mind of symbiotes. Knull had now become an intergalactic despot and overlord. Knull hated the cosmic light, and Earth had an abundance of it. Naturally, Knull was attracted to Earth, and he took control of one of his symbiote dragons that arrived on Earth in the 6th century Scandinavia. The terrorized residents called the monster a Grendel. Knull's brutal rampage also drew the attention of a powerful and young Thor, who struck the Grendel with his divine lightning. Knull had never earlier witnessed such a unique form of the power of light, and was taken aback because Thor's blow severed Knull's connection with his symbiote minions, rendering the hive mind useless. They became free of his control, and the Grendel unraveled into several offshoot symbiotes. These symbiotes then ventured out to find newer hosts, because their lives had no existence or context without a host. They bonded with noble and benevolent hosts and became enamored with ideas like justice and peace. With the knowledge of new concepts like justice, nobility, and peace, the symbiotes rebelled against their creator. They assembled together to trap him on Klyntar, which meant a cage in the language of the symbiotes. We learn that Klyntar was not an actual planet, but a planet-sized assembly of symbiotes for the purpose of caging Knull at the heart of this planet. Many centuries later, in 1966, the Grendel symbiote was found by S.H.I.E.L.D. They used it to create super soldiers under the Sim Soldier program. Interestingly, despite a severed connection with other symbiotes, he could still communicate with the Grendel itself. With the help of Grendel, Knull started to assert his control over the offshoots, making them spread terror and driving their hosts violently crazy. Decades later, Knull managed to make the symbiote dragon break free of containment and absorb all but one of its offshoots. The dragon then reached Manhattan to wreak its havoc, but Venom and Spider-Man effectively stopped it. Furthermore, by now, Knull's connection with the Grendel symbiote dragon had also been severed.
Abandoned the Klyntar and left to be alone. He showed no concern.
Klyntar, the race and planet of the symbiotes, explored. The Klyntar are amorphous, inorganic, symbiotic extraterrestrials that Knull created billions of years ago from the living abyss. As a race of aliens, Klyntars are better known as symbiotes and are known to have infected several hosts, including Iron Man, Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, Wolverine, etc. Knull established himself as the center of the hive mind for a massive army of Klyntar, or symbiotes. With their help, he devoured civilizations across the universe for billions of years. When Knull's symbiote dragons arrived in Scandinavia in the 6th century, Thor Odin's son severed the hive mind connection through his divine lightning. Few of the offshoots of Grendel started to bond with noble hosts and learned that their creator was evil. They rebelled against Knull and imprisoned him at the heart of the artificial planet that they had created with their huge numbers. They called this planet and themselves Klyntar, which was the term for cage in their language. Having trapped Knull and with the newfound knowledge of his evil nature and the evil deeds they performed under him, the Klyntar symbiotes invented and spread a lie that their species was intrinsically benevolent and kind. Furthermore, they endeavored to spread peace across the universe, and for this purpose, they created an intergalactic society of peacekeepers called the Agents of the Cosmos, and also a hive mind that could sense the voice of the cosmos. The Agents of the Cosmos were nothing but worthy alien hosts. In their desperate quest to expunging their violent past, the Klyntar hive mind started to cut off the evil or corrupt symbiotes, and also executed their own kind, who relapsed and resorted to becoming violent again. However, several of the exiled symbiotes started to infect others and overtake entire planets. Naturally, despite the efforts of the Agents of Cosmos to paint a better picture of their species, the Klyntar were considered as a predatory race across the universe. The corrupt symbiotes would feed on the emotions and bodies of their hosts, and force them to perform spectacularly terrifying tasks to feed on the host's adrenaline, phenethylamine, and other hormones. Eventually, the hosts would lose their essential bodily fluids and collapse while performing a failed stunt, and the symbiote would go on to search for another host, so that the same process could be repeated. Over a period of time, the artificial planet of Klyntar gained a rocky crust and an atmosphere. These geographical changes helped it to further disguise its true nature and masquerade as a planet because it also developed Klyntar-based flora and fauna. Knull, in the void left by Thanos in the MCU. After Venom and Spider-Man defeated Knull's Grendel's symbiote dragon, a cult of humans called the Church of New Darkness recovered a piece of the Grendel's symbiote and attempted to resurrect Cletus Kasady to transform him into Knull's avatar. When the symbiote bonded with Kasady, Knull himself communicated with the serial killer. Now back as Carnage, he began killing and soon learned that he could gain more power by assembling several codecs, which was nothing but a part of the symbiote DNA that was left when a symbiote bonded with a host. Furthermore, Knull employed a number of maniacs under him, including the likes of Norman Osborn. However, Eddie Brock soon learned about Carnage's return. With the help of Reed Richards or Mr. Fantastic, or the Maker, Brock assembled several codices. During his battle with Carnage, however, Brock was faced with choosing an option between freeing Knull from Klyntar and saving his son Dylan. Brock chose the latter and unleashed Knull while killing Carnage in the process. Knull's ultimate destination was Earth, the place because of which he was forced to remain imprisoned for centuries, and the place that stripped him of his control over his creation. However, it took him a bit of time to reach Earth. On Earth, Dylan had kept the codex that was left behind when a symbiote had bonded with Norman Osborn. Because the symbiote was part of the Grendel, Knull could communicate with Dylan. Meanwhile, a part of the Carnage symbiote had remained, and it bonded with Brock, who tried his best to remove the symbiote. After much trouble, Brock went to the Avengers and informed them about the impending doom that was Carnage, much like Bruce Banner had come to Earth to inform the Avengers about Thanos. Since Thor had already experienced what one of the Knull's minions could do, he knew that Knull himself would be one of the biggest challenges that Earth's mightiest heroes will ever face. On Earth, Knull, his hordes, and his dragons quickly overpowered Earth's mightiest heroes, and Knull revealed his intention of destroying the little blue planet. Knull warned that the carnage and rampage would be slow and brutal if humans didn't present Brock to him. Soon, his minions took control of the X-Men, the Avengers, and other heroes who had come to fight him and stop him from turning Earth into a living abyss. Venom arrived and offered to serve Knull, but Knull was looking for the other Brock. He was looking for Dylan. Knull ripped Venom out of Eddie and threw him off the Empire State Building. Knull was assured that Eddie would no longer possess a threat to his grand plans. But then, Dylan entered the battlefield. Interestingly enough, Dylan had a mysterious ability to destroy symbiotes. He quickly freed many heroes who were enslaved by the symbiotes, but then he caught the attention of Knull, who attempted to capture him, only to be attacked by Thor. As Dylan and Thor battled Knull, Eddie had risen with a new codex, and Eddie had now transformed into a super powerful cosmic version of Venom, or the King in Black. He had become the new god of symbiotes as well as the new hive mind. Witnessing this, Knull attempted to flee, but Eddie stripped Knull of his symbiote armor and flew him into the sun, hence destroying his body. The Dark God had been seemingly destroyed once and for all. So this was the gist of what happened in various comics up until today. We earlier mentioned that Knull communicated with Cletus Kasady in the comics, so it is quite a possibility that Marvel might be teasing the Thanos-level villain in the upcoming film Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Carnage was the reason why Knull got free from Klyntar, and his presence as the primary antagonist in the film reflects the fact that Knull may be introduced in these films. Well, if you are thinking that Knull is an alien to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we implore you to discard that notion. Do you remember the sword that Hela, Odin's daughter, used in Thor Ragnarok? And how she could kill almost anyone with a single blow of her weapons? Well, that's because the weapons were made of the Necrosword, or the sentient sword created by Knull, which was the first ever symbiote. So, although the symbiotes have not appeared in the Marvel Studios movies, a weapon that only answered to and inherently belonged to the very god of symbiotes has made its presence. And that, my friends, is big.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.
His weapons were not just tools, they were life forms.